All right, troops, strong and conditioned, live and direct from Glasgow, Scotland. And tonight I have the very, very big honour of having one of the true fitness OGs. And when you say OGs nowadays, people just think YouTube fitness OGs, but my guest predates that YouTube era. And anybody who has been in the trenches for a number of years will definitely know who this gentleman is. It's the one and only Jay Ferruggia. Jay, how are you, brother?
Oh, Lee, thanks for having me, man. I'm good. Good. I appreciate being on.
It's an absolute pleasure. I was very excited to make contact with you because I used to read a lot of your articles way back in the day, back in like the T Nation days when T Nation was big.
Right.
And they were a big influence on me, probably because I could feel those hip hop vibes coming from your content. However,
Yeah.
that's not to take away from the value of the content itself, because you were one of the guys who was pushing a style of training which is still carried on to this day, and you were one of the originators of that said style of training, which was very influential in my life. But enough back rubs at this point. Now, Jason, the first question I wanted to touch on was you have Scottish roots, which is very interesting. Can you expand on those Scottish roots, please?
Yeah. My mom was born in Glasgow, lived there till she was 10. And that entire side of the family is from Scotland. So we have a lot of people that are still in Scotland. And then there's a town in New Jersey. So they all came to New Jersey. There's a town called Kearney, New Jersey. And it just has this huge Scottish population, a lot of like fish and chips places and Scottish butcher where you get like the breakfast sausage and all those kinds of things. So we grew up going there like once a week. And again, if I go to a party on that side of the family, everybody speaks exactly like you do. That's why I was like, yeah, I can totally understand your accent, no problem. Feels like home.
Did your mother get any food for it sent over from Scotland?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And was there any particular food that stood out?
I mean, it was just like as a kid, all my aunts and uncles and everybody would just send like sweets over, like stuff that I feel like you couldn't get here. They would send all kinds of candy bars, and different sweets, and Smarties, and this and that, and flakes, and all these like I don't know, all this stuff we couldn't get here.
And do you think there's a big difference in quality between Scottish chocolate and American chocolate?
It's hard to say because I stopped eating. I mean, now once in a blue moon, I'll have some real high quality organic chocolate. Back then, I was just eating whatever I could, so I wasn't really thinking that way.
Okay, well, here's the most important question. Have you ever tasted Iron Brew?
No, remind me what that is.
It's like a soft juice, a soft drink. It's like the Scottish version of Coca-Cola, but it's like a orangey red,
Oh yeah,
vibrant
yeah,
color.
yeah, yeah. And doesn't it have like 1,000 grams of sugar or something?
I think a cupful has 1,000 grams of sugar. I think it's probably got a kilogram of sugar in there.
Yeah, yeah.
I I actually think that Iron Brew is illegal in America because it has a preservative in it of some sorts.
Okay, okay, yeah.
And obviously, you've tasted haggis.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And what is your opinion on haggis, Jay?
It's not a regular, part of my diet. It's alright, not something I'm craving.
Okay, well, kudos for being the first American that I've had on who has not referred to Glasgow as Glasgow. Uh, I was on a podcast with a gentleman and he called Glasgow Glasgow and he caused a degree of controversy
Oh.
and a few comments thrown in his direction.
Yeah.
Okay, Jay, so for the listeners who are not aware of your presence, can you please elaborate on the origins of your fitness journey?
Sure. So I grew up. I was a fat, unathletic, insecure, shy, socially awkward kid. And then when I went into high school, I was like 5 feet tall, and then I grew a foot. So I graduated high school at 6 feet tall and 147 pounds. And I started training in eighth grade. So after 5 years of training, I was still 147 pounds. I wasn't really getting anywhere. So I was like, Mr. Hard Gainer. Like my wife's wrists are bigger than mine, and so I kind of just became obsessed because as a little kid, I would wake up every Saturday morning and watch cartoons, so I wanted to be like, like He-Man and the Super Friends and all that. And then I watched pro wrestling, so I wanted to be like the British Bulldogs or Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior or Superfly Snooker or these guys. And then what happened was in 1988, my cousin Christine started dating a professional wrestler, and he was huge, and they lived 2 houses down from me. So now all of a sudden, the guys I see on TV, he's 1 house down. Now, he wasn't in WWF; he was in like a smaller federation, but still, dude, 6'5", 240. So I get to see him all the time, and that really was like, oh man, I got more and more into training. Um, but again, I wasn't really getting anywhere doing what I was doing at the time. So when I went into college, I just kind of immersed myself in studying, learning more, ordering every single book I could out of the back of Iron Man magazine, interning in the weight room, starting to get certifications. And then I started training people on my own when I was 20, still going to college. And things kind of just took off. I don't even know how, because I didn't know that much about training. I didn't really know anything about business, but it kind of just took off really fast. And so by the end of my first summer training people, I was on pace to make 6 figures, which was like, holy shit. So I transferred schools, went back home to Jersey, and just every dime I made, I saved so that I could rent space. And a lot of people say something's underground, but it was literally underground. It was in a basement. It was 1,000 square feet in a basement. And every dime I made, I invested into buying equipment for the gym. First, it was like, low quality, crappy equipment. And then as I made more money, I was able to invest in better equipment. And at first, I was just training adults, people my age now. And then eventually I got my first athlete, and then he referred me another athlete. And then, within a year or two, that was really my passion, was training high school, college athletes. Some of those guys wanted to become pro. So then uh, that was, we'd have like 50 to 70 kids coming in a day training. So I was just obsessed with training athletes. So I started writing for Elite FTS and TMAG and that kind of stuff back in the day, because we were getting such great results, right? Like everybody who was coming in was gaining 30 to 50 pounds of muscle and squatting 4 or 5 plates. It was like, like clockwork. And so then I got in every magazine. I got my own column in Men's Fitness. And then that was kind of like the journey, for the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
however many years it was.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, because you said something interesting there, which was you weren't getting any results.
hmm
Looking back now, why do you think you weren't getting the results?
Because I started from doing nothing, right? I was just like a skinny fat. Well, at that time I was still fat. I was just like a fat, unathletic kid, uh, trying. I mean, I played sports, but I wasn't really good. And then eventually, I was pretty good at basketball, actually. But I went from zero working out to what the pro wrestler dude was doing, which was 7 days a week, 2 hours, like 20 sets for buys and 20 sets for tries. And I had like those crappy hard gainer genetics. I couldn't recover. I think I was just overtraining and just doing all the wrong stuff at that time. And like I was always so sore, I couldn't even comb my hair, brush my teeth. It was just all the things I would tell someone not to do now.
Yeah,
Um, so I just had to figure out. It wasn't until I started reading like the old stuff, like um, there was a guy named Bill Hinburn who used to sell all these old classic like pamphlets and books out of the back of Iron Man magazine. I think even before the internet, so you could get a hold of stuff like like Reg Park stuff, or anything from the early days like the Bosco or Steve Reeves or Hackenschmidt and Arthur Saxon and stuff like that, and even Super Squats and John McCallum. So I cut my volume way back, trained fewer days per week, focused more on big compound exercises, eating more. I think that was the thing at the beginning too. I was just eating like a normal high school kid, where I realized, no matter what age you are, you're gonna have to eat a decent amount if you really want to try to gain some weight. But certainly as a high school kid, I was eating probably a quarter of what I needed to, which a lot of times, you probably experience the same thing, right? We hear people are like, "Oh, I eat so much." We're like, "Okay, let's look at it." It's like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's 2,000 calories. You need 4,200 to gain weight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What strikes me straight away is that back then, the nutritional information that was available was very rare. Like
Yeah.
I was just told to drink milk, eat pasta, and eat
Right.
chicken. That was
Right.
it. And
Right.
and but when you're a kid, you don't buy your own food.
Right.
You're relying on your parents to supply
Yeah.
the nutrition, and they're hardly going to try and fund some like sort of
Right.
bodybuilding lifestyle.
Yeah.
and just start buying hundreds of chicken, because at that age you're eating like you're just eating shit. You're eating
Yeah. Oh my
frozen
God.
food
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
money wasn't as prevalent back then
Yeah. Even
as
when
it
I
is.
was when I realized how much I needed to eat, it wasn't healthy food. I was going, like to McDonald's, getting 5 egg McMuffins and cheese, and drinking a carton of chocolate milk, and then my post workout meal was a meat lover's pizza with a 32-ounce Gatorade. It was not like what you'd consider clean and healthy.
Sounds like the typical Scottish diet.
Yeah.
So what was the first book that you came across that made everything click?
I think the first book was because it was even before I think you could order a lot of those books out of magazines. There was a fitness equipment store. I remember I could still picture where it was on Route 22 in Union, New Jersey. And they had like 5 or 6 books back then. They had like Arnold's Encyclopedia and whatever was big in like the late 80s, early 90s, right? And there was Heavy Duty by Mike Mentzer, which I got that. And then a few months later in 1993, well, when did Yates release? I don't know. Yeah, it's probably 93. Dorian Yates released Blood and Guts. And so I read those two and I was like, oh, this is the complete opposite of what I'm doing, because they were super low volume. I was doing super high volume. So I did that, and that started to make a big change. And then all of a sudden it was more like, I think it was those two first. And then that led me to all the old school stuff that I mentioned before, the stuff from like 1906 with Saxon and Hackenschmidt, all the way up to like the 50s and 60s, and Vince Gironda and Larry Scott and all that stuff. I mean, I became obsessed with that. Like any single book I could read on the old school stuff, I loved.
Yeah. Were you sticking to a single program back then, or were you being more experimental in your approach?
Um, I feel like I remember. It's hard to remember because probably like yourself, I did everything. But I do remember sticking with super squats for a long time, like the 20 rep squat stuff. And I had a set program where it'd be like, you do those 20 rep squats on all 3 days, and then one day was like dips and chins, and one day was bench and bent over rows, and one day was, I don't know, whatever the press and pull was, right? And I remember sticking with that for a long time and drinking a gallon of milk every day. And I did gain a lot of weight doing that. Now, a lot of it was fat, but still, I did get really strong and gain a lot of weight doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How did you manage to weather the mental storm that comes with doing a program like Super Squats? Because Super Squats is an all-consuming program.
Mm.
No one I think that nowadays we get excited about going into the gym. I tend to find that before going into the gym, before I go in, I'm excited. Then when I'm in the gym, I'm just kind of like plodding along to a certain degree. But back then, like when you were doing a program like Super Squats, you go into a program with like fear, trepidation,
Yeah,
particularly when you're knee deep into Super Squats.
yeah, yeah. That was yeah. When you get deep into it, those are the words, right? Fear and trepidation. Like you're like Jesus, because you had to, no matter what, you had to put 5 pounds on, right? It's like Jesus. And I remember we used to train so hard in my gym, and like people would be puking. And my brother and I are kind of nuts, so like there was one of those long fluorescent light bulbs that you put in the ceiling. They're like it's like holding a lightsaber, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember one time he had to go up, like he was new PR by a mile, and he fucking smashes the thing over his head before he goes into the rack. And we would do all kinds of stupid shit like that. And then this kid, I mean, and he's 5 years younger than me, so I would wake him up. Like he was like, I would experiment on him. He's in high school, right? He's like 13, and I'm waking him up in the middle of the night to drink Carbo Forces, like when we were experimenting with Duchesne's original body opus diet and all this stuff. And he's like, Jesus Christ. So I made him train his ass off from the time he was like 11. So we're in there doing super squats one day. And I remember exactly what he had on. He had 287 pounds that he was going for. And he's still like in high school. He's trying to hit 20 with that. Maybe he was in college at the time. He was young. He was like somewhere between 18 and 23. And I had hit that. So he had to beat me. And he goes down and he comes up and he goes, fuck, something popped. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I just blew something out of my knee. And I was like, all right, you want us to take it? He goes, no, I got to beat you. And he fucking does 3 more reps and beats me with his knee blown out. It's like, the shit we did back then was just insanity, And then right after, we're like, all right, well, I guess we're going to drive you to go get knee surgery now.
So going by that logic, I assume that super squats is not a program that you would recommend to one of your older clients.
No.
But do you feel that built up the mental fortitude which carried on towards your progress as you started to traverse the iron game, so to speak?
Yeah, you just had to learn to suck it up and deal with the pain, right? And you're like, are both of my hands supposed to be completely numb? And you're like, yeah, that's totally normal. I've been under this weight for like 13 minutes. Is this right?
Yeah, I think there's programs out there that like they kind of transcend program. They're not a program in the conventional sense where it's cookie cutter.
Yeah.
They are like a story program. They take you on a journey. Like there's super squats. I think Dan John has one as well called Mass Made Simple.
Yep.
Where you have to do 50 rep squats at the end of the program.
Yeah.
And these workouts, they are a true journey.
Mm.
They're not like you just do like you add a set on every week and you just watch your tonnage go up. These are like the fucking adventures, and I think that's what's missing today.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's a great point, dude. That's a great point. Because everyone's so concerned, and I get it, especially at my age, like everyone's so concerned with joint health, staying injury free, managing fatigue, all good points.
Yeah.
But like, if you don't have, it'd be like football practice if you didn't have those mental toughness challenges, where scientifically, like, that does nothing, but it builds fucking mental toughness, right? Like, so I agree with you. Like, I wouldn't change any of those workouts for the world. We could argue now, and maybe they weren't the smartest thing, but man, you had so much fun, and you built a lot of work ethic and mental toughness doing that.
Absolutely. I just have visions that your friend's still under that bar right now as we speak.
Yeah.
So, what was the transition into when you decided to actually make this a career path?
So I went into college wanting to major in communications. So I thought I would host like a show or something, and I also directed. I took film classes, but looking back, it's kind of crazy to think that because I was so quiet and shy back then that I would have not been good at doing either of those things. That was a journey I had to go on many years later. So it just became my personal obsession, right? And then uh, it was during school. Like I all of a sudden, what happened was I got really sick. I was home from school on Christmas break, and I was working out, and every day was getting worse and worse and worse. And then I called the doctor. I was like, dude, I do 3 reps. I can't even breathe. And he's like, all right, well, we'll just prescribe you something. We're super busy. And back in those days, you just used to pop a Z-Pack, pop a prescription like it was candy, you know? So I did it for 2 days. I keep going to the gym. I can't breathe at all. I'm dying. And I just keep going to the gym though. And I called up the doctor, like, all right, come on in. I get there. They go, oh man, you got to go see a heart and lung specialist immediately. So I get there. He goes, you got to go to the hospital immediately. He calls a nurse. He goes, get an ambulance here. And I go, what's going on? Can I at least go home? He's like, no, you got to go to the hospital. So I go there. They drain a pint of fluid out of my lungs. It looks like a bottle of scotch. And they said, if you waited till tomorrow, you would have drowned. Your lungs were filling up with fluid. So during that time, I stayed home. I had to stay home from school. I skipped that semester. So that was when everything changed for me. It was like, I guess a blessing in disguise or whatever, because I was like, well, I got nothing to do. Let me order every VHS tape, every certification, everything there is, just because I'm obsessed with this. And who knows, maybe I'll do it on the side, and maybe I'll get into something with communications or whatever. And like I said, somehow I just ended up training somebody that summer just from a friend of my dad's. So it was like, yeah, why don't you train me? And then it just blew up, and I was like, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing. I still, even the first couple of years, I was like, I'll probably end up doing something else. I did have dreams of going into pro wrestling, believe it or not. And there was a time where I had signed up for Killer Kowalski's wrestling school, which was where Triple H went. And then I broke my arm like 2 weeks before. And then, so it's 2 things. It was me getting sick, and then me breaking my arm before going to Killer Kowalski's that just kind of, set my career path.
Yeah. You said something interesting there when you spoke about making use of that time, ordering VHSs. Do you think that because information was harder or more difficult to access back then. It wasn't like you could just go online and just like get a YouTube video up or a TikTok reel or whatever you call it. It's a slow drip of information. But do you think that creates like a slow burning passion for the industry as opposed to just being like fucking bombarded with information where you just 6 months later you just burn out?
Honestly, I think if I was starting today, that's a great point. I'd probably be like, this is too overwhelming. Everybody's saying the opposite thing and this and that and the other thing. I'd be like, I got to do something else. This is crazy, And so I get why the average person goes to look for fitness information and loses their mind. It's just too much. Too much. Even I'll go on sometimes and I'll look at people I respect and I'm like, what am I doing? This is just driving me mad,
So when you decided to like make this your career, do you think you were in the right place at the right time? Because it was very niche when you were starting to make your presence in the fitness industry, so to speak.
Yeah, it was probably the right place, right time. It was a time when it was almost like, and I never even said this before, this is just coming to mind for the first time, so it might sound a little egotistical coming out, but it's like when Pearl Jam and Nirvana came in during the hair band era. It was like back then all you could do was go to like Golds or Bally's or whatever and just do like bodybuilding workouts that you got in Flex magazine, or you could take classes which were basically aerobic classes like Jane Fonda, right? And then I came and I had this underground gym and we're playing NWA, Public Enemy, and blasting music, and there's fucking no rules, and we didn't beg to take your money. Like, you had to try out or you got kicked the fuck out. There was like hazing, like a fraternity. You had to earn your spot, and it was so different. And the way we were training was so different. Like we were doing all the stuff that's popular today. So we were, doing a lot of powerlifting stuff. We had bands, we had chains, we had rings. 20 years before anyone was using rings, we had sandbags, we had sledgehammers, tires, kegs, all this kind of stuff. We were flipping, tires and doing strongman stuff outside, doing farmers carries. A lot of that I attribute to a book called Dinosaur Training, which came out in 1996 by Brooks Stewart. I got that book. I still remember the royal blue cover and the guy on the cover with the barrel. And I was like, oh, this is sick. So you couldn't just go online and order all that stuff. There was no internet. So you had to know a guy who knew a guy. Like, I remember driving into New York to the ship docks, and that's where we would get ropes and like anchors and stuff to press around, to carry and stuff like that. And then we had to go to a liquor store and beg them to buy an empty keg and then fill it up. And I mean, that's how you got stuff. Nobody was selling chains to work out with. You had to go to a construction place or something, right? So it was just fun getting that stuff. Like, we had to drive to Philadelphia, we had to drive to New York, we had to go here, there, and the other thing. And it was just so unique what we were doing at the time. Nobody was doing it. And then as far as like group training, the way it is now in like a CrossFit class or something, again, maybe someone else on the planet was doing it. I don't know. So because I don't know, I claim that I invented it. But you were just doing one-on-one training, or again, you were going to a class. So I took my athletes and they were like, we would love to train together. And I was like, cool, you guys come in. So it started as 3, then it grew to 4, then it was 6. And then we were doing, what I say is real training in groups. Like most training group stuff, I'm like, it's not really real training. It's like some weird circuit hybrid that kind of just makes you worse. I don't even think it does anything, So, yeah.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a few things. I want to kind of put that into context because it's interesting when you speak about things like the chains and the kegs. What was the actual common training sort of environment in that day in which the chains had that contrast? What was the norm?
Do you mean like what kind of training templates were we doing, or what?
No. What was gym culture like back then in like New Jersey, for example, like in conjunction with the way you were training?
Yeah, so you basically just had bodybuilding gyms, right? It was 94 when I started. So 94, 95, 96 is basically Flex Magazine, Muscle and Fitness, fanny packs, candy cane striped pants or Zubaz pants or something, and stringer tanks. And you just going in the gym and using machines and doing body part splits. And we weren't doing that. We were doing what Now I hate the term, but back then we were doing functional training and, training like athlete. I was training mainly athletes at the time. So we had a record board and we were, trying to set records all the time and just doing different stuff. And so we would use the chains because also around that time, early, I think like 99, I probably found Westside Barbell and Louis Simmons. So that was when we got the chains to put on the bars for accommodating resistance. But then we'd also use them just for weighted stuff, just to get it look cool, right? To put chains around your neck and do dips, and chains around your back to do push-ups and things like that. So everything we were doing, um, again, I didn't know that much about marketing, branding, but I knew like this is creating something unique. This is creating a culture. Everyone here is part of a team. You see a lot of those shirts now, like Detroit versus everybody or whoever versus everybody, right? And it was like Renegade versus everybody. Like we were doing our thing. We were underground. We were kind of like counterculture rebels.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and then finally a gym. So the bodybuilding era was kind of ending, and then a lot of sports specific performance places were opening. So I remember this place. I remember the name of it exactly. I remember what it looked like. It was like 10,000 square feet, and they had all kinds of investors, millions of dollars, big name people involved, and they could not get anyone. I had every sport, all the best athletes within a 20-minute radius came to me, and I remember somebody said to me, they said, "Yo, we just met with those people for tests," and they were like, how does that fucking renegade guy in the basement have all these people and we can't get anyone to come here? And it was just because it was so unique. We created that culture that people wanted to be part of.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because when you look at gyms back then, the squat rack was barely touched.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Yeah.
no one squatted. And
Yep. Yeah.
when you look at a gym now, when you go into a commercial gym, you can't get near a fucking squat rack.
No, I
Like,
know. I know.
you cannot get
It's so
near.
nuts how it's changed.
As an aside, do you think that's going to turn again? Like, because things go in cycles. Do you
I
think it's
know
going to
they
come up?
do, but no, I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah.
there has been a thing which I think anyone who's paid attention to the industry, the last I'd say maybe 3 years, there has been a heightened awareness of well-designed machines, and so now you have more companies coming out like Prime. I mean, Prime used to be Strive, so they've been around forever, and Atlantis has been around for a long time, but just they're pumping out more stuff like Atlantis, Prime, um, Arsenal. Flex Lewis is involved with Arsenal, and so I think there's people are appreciating that more and understanding, some of the benefits, especially of well-designed stuff. Like you could have three pieces, let's say three different hack squats. One completely destroys your knees, one is barely worth doing, and one's great. It just depends on the brand, the company, and how it was designed.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that the rise of the machine again is taking the fun out of lifting weights?
Mm, maybe, maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I seen an interesting video the other day, and it was one of the gentlemen who was talking about the video. It was critiquing a video, and it was talking about tempo training and like guys doing reps for 10 and everything had to be slow and controlled. And from a muscle building perspective, I guess it makes sense because you're just trying to create like new tissue. But there was also that aspect that it becomes boring and it takes
yeah,
away from the essence of just going in and just grabbing heavy weight and
yeah,
just lifting it and throwing it about and having fun with
yes,
the weight. It's probably not conducive to a joint healthy endeavor in that respect, but there's
yeah.
always going to be a payoff.
Totally. No, I 100% hear what you're saying, and I do agree. And I've had that conversation with friends before. Like, yeah, to the average person, that would probably be boring. I mean, that's what I tend to lean towards now, just of
Yeah.
being 49 and having a
Yeah.
history of injuries and whatnot. But fuck, man, if I was younger and you told me to go in and do that, hell no. I want to crank up a Public Enemy and get really aggressive and throw weight, be pissed off, be spitting on the floor and headbutting stuff. And again, if you told me to slow something down, I'm like, dude, that sucks. Like I want to have fun and smash weights. So
Yeah.
I agree. I see it. I think if you're younger, like we alluded to before, do that. Do the 20 rep squat programs, do all the stuff, like push yourself. It doesn't have to be, there's too much of this, oh, it has to be scientifically perfect, it has to be optimal. Don't worry about that. Do stupid shit, like go through the journey. And then eventually you'll get to a point where, again, closing in on 50. And maybe if you're closing in on 50, but you've never trained before and your joints are fine, do that
Yeah.
shit for a year or two, right? But like
Yeah,
I've been training since I was 13, so I got to be a little bit smarter now.
yeah, of course,
Otherwise,
of course.
I'm limping around for a week, but that's not a good look either. But yeah,
Well,
I agree.
at least you can say you've done it, because I feel sometimes that gyms they're becoming quite sterile in some
Totally.
way.
Yeah.
Like you'll see the young guy walk in, he's got his those big massive bags, and
Yeah.
they walk in really slowly and they're observing the environment, and they see them and they walk and the whole workout's slow and controlled, and then they just leave, and I'm looking at it going, that is the most fucking boring existence on earth.
It really is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everything's all perfect. They got their outfit all perfect. And what I always find that it drives me nuts if anyone's training with even one other person, or sometimes they're in groups of 3 or 4 and they have headphones in. I'm like, well, what's the point? Why aren't you just training alone? Like I'm supposed to be here with you. What is that?
Yeah.
Why would I have headphones on?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It's funny you bring that up, Jay, because like I work in a gym and I see a lot of young guys come in and they will come in with their buddy, and one of them will have headphones on. And I'm thinking, is that not considered to be quite rude?
It's so rude.
Like,
It's so weird. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems to be the cultural norm. Maybe I'm just getting old and I'm becoming like my father in that
Yeah.
respect. And you're just thinking, shut the fuck up, old man. You don't know. But
Well,
I
I
want, I
think in
want to go.
general, outside of the gym, I find it shocking that an adult would talk to another adult with headphones on. If I have earbuds in and I meet you at a coffee shop, the first thing I do is this: take them out. I start talking. People always, I was like, dude, how could you not know that? It's crazy.
I know the world's changing. It's changing before our very eyes.
Yeah.
I want to go back to when you spoke about dinosaur training, because that piqued my interest.
Mm.
Because I've read Dinosaur Training as well. It's a phenomenal book.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's one of those books, though, if I was to go back and read it, I wouldn't really use the information that Brooks Kubik was like espousing at that point. I
Mm.
think the thing about books like Super Squats, Dinosaur Training, Brawn, it wasn't the information per se, it was the way it was written.
Right. Yes.
Like
100%. Yep.
particularly dinosaur training, because if you think about when you were beginning your training journey and you spoke about being that hard gainer, you're doing 50 sets of wrist curls and you're wondering why you've still got the tiny wrists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you had Brooks Kubik, like he was insulting that training
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
in a very testosterone soaked manner.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you're right. That's all. It was the delivery, right? It wasn't the
Yeah.
because you got fired up. Like if you read
Yes.
something now about like, oh,
Yeah.
well, the incline should be 15 degrees and the moment arm is this, and it's like, I'm asleep, right? Like you're not like, yeah, fuck yeah. With Brooks Kubik or with I don't know if you remember John McCallum, like he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
greatest storyteller ever. So you're
Yeah.
just reading these stories and you're enthralled and you're engaged. You're like, oh, I want to go do squats right now, you know? Whereas now it's almost like it's deflating, right? It's like, well, your squat has to look like this, and you got to tuck it in. It's like, all right, dude, I'm like back in high school, nodding out, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's another thing that's missing from the fitness industry in that respect, is that I think Dan John still does it to this day, but they were presenting the information in story form, which our brains
Yeah,
respond to. Like if
yeah,
someone tells you a story, you're listening, and if they
yeah,
can tell the story with good delivery, then you are hypnotized. You're
yeah,
sucked in.
yeah,
And like Brooks Kubik was almost, he was emasculating you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is great. I love that.
But he was telling you to do like dumbbell snatches for singles,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
thinking, and you're thinking, that's what I've been sitting doing fucking wrist curls until the cows come home,
yeah,
when I should have been doing fucking 100 kilo
right.
dumbbell snatches.
Yeah, yeah.
So did you start to implement like some of that Brooks Kubik
Oh, yeah.
like into the?
Yeah, we had, I remember one time we had the keg and it was, like 2/3 full, so it would be sloshing around and stuff. And we were having a keg clean and press contest, and my brother was involved, and somebody who was a friend, and also I trained him when he played college and semi-pro baseball. His name was Joe Cuervo, and Joe was jacked, like he could have stepped on a bodybuilding stage. He trained with me for years, and he led the Big East in stolen bases. And so, let's say I got 17 and Joe was at 14. And all of a sudden, because there was a little leak in the keg. So the water that had been in there for 2 years was disgusting and it would, fall down on your face a little. And so it was really hot too. So it gets a little slippery no matter how much chalk we use. So the keg comes down, splits Joe's eyebrow open Mick Foley popped him like this. And he's just blowing the blood out like this. And it's going on all of us. It's going on the wall. But he did not stop. He did the 4 more reps he needed to beat me. Then we go to the ER, get him stitched up, and he comes back and finishes whatever we had on the workout that day. Crazy.
Right. So, Jay, I'm starting to get a little worried here because that's the second gentleman you've described in a training context who's almost killed themselves in the pursuit of gains.
I got plenty of those, yeah. I don't know how we all survive.
Do you miss those days, Jay?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, so much fun.
Yeah. And do you think that the gym environments today are missing that camaraderie?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you bring it back? What do you think that the gym industry needs? What do you think it's missing nowadays?
Oh, man. It's hard to say. I don't know if you can do it in a public gym. I think you have to have maybe a private or semi-private gym or just charge a premium and, have, I don't know, it's got to be a different model. I think, I don't think you're going to do it in one of those sterile public gyms these days. Maybe. I mean, I was in a gym not too long ago in Orange County in Cali, and it definitely had that kind of vibe where they could make it more like that. But I think it's just so hard. It's just society in general is very different.
Yeah.
Well, there's people who crave it and people who want it. So if you did it right, I think you could, get people really excited about it.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you have taken from those days and you still implement in the way you train today?
Just still doing things a little bit differently. Still a lot of the functional exercises we did back then. Like I'm still a big fan of loaded carries, always a big fan of loaded carries. I'll still use sandbags, still use sledgehammers, tires, sleds. We didn't even have a sled back then. We would just make makeshift stuff. We would push a car or drag a heavy tire that we loaded with cement. So all those kind of things I still do. And then anytime I'm getting a group of people together, whether it be in my garage gym or whether we're on the road, and maybe if I'm doing one of my own events, renting a gym, we're still creating that environment. So I'm still controlling the music, cranking shit up. We're going to go super intense. Everyone's going to be pushing each other, screaming, setting PRs. So I'll recreate that to this day.
Yeah. What are some things that you look back on and go, oh, I shouldn't have really been doing that?
Oh, man, so many things. Probably like, maxing out, 1 RM, 52 weeks a year. And then the days where you're like, you do a few reps, you're like, oh, my shoulder feels like it's going to fall off. You're like, that's fine. Just rub some blue heat on it. It'll be fine. You should definitely work up to a 1 rep max on a 3-board press today. And then hit some smelling salts or something. So doing that all the time was probably the number one thing I would not want to do.
Yeah. Why do you think like men in particular do these crazy things where they do feel a twinge in a shoulder? And you know yourself, that's a signal, that's a sign. And why do we ignore it, Jay?
I think it's just, I mean, if you're by yourself and you're ignoring it, it's kind of stupid, but I've done it. But if you're in an environment, right, it's me, you, and 3 other guys, then it's like, okay, then, sensibility goes out the window. It's like tribal. It's like, all right, we're all competing. I got to see how much Lee did here. I got to see how much Mike did here. And, let's push each other. And then you're kind of out, right? Like if you guys are all competing and I'm like, oh, I got to tap out. It's like, I'm miserable. My day's ruined. So I'd rather go in, put some blue heat on and try to beat whatever you got. You know what I mean? I think it's just in our nature as men to want to compete and be part of the tribe, right? Like then I feel useless. Like I'm not part of the tribe anymore. I can't contribute. I'm out. I'm on the shelf. I don't know. It's just my nature to want to compete. And
So like when we go past that training style, where are we at nowadays?
Nowadays, I just what I do personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nowadays I'll do like a push pull leg split, or I might have a four. Yeah, I'll have either 3 or 4 day split. Like I might break up like a push day, a pull day, and have 2 different leg days throughout the day, like a quad throughout the week, quad based and a hamstring glute focus. But basically, I'm always doing something like that. Um, and then, to go back to what we were talking about before, now again, at my stage of the game, I am trying to minimize fatigue, minimize wear and tear on my joints. I'm still trying to train super hard, but not go over the edge, right? Just walk that fine line. Whereas if I don't train super hard, training's not fun. I don't want to do it. It's also not a stress relief anymore. So I want to train super hard. So I just have to dial back the volume to whatever I can recover from. Um, and just cover basic movement, like nothing crazy, basic movement patterns. What I would do now that I don't do is sequence exercises. Like back then I didn't even think about it. I was like, whatever, let's just walk in and bench, let's walk in and squat. Now I'll always do, and with guys my age and that, I'll do, let's say, hamstrings before we squat. I might even do
Yeah,
hamstrings, glutes. So I might do like a glute ham raise, a hip thrust, and a rear foot elevated split squat, and then squat. And then your
yeah,
squat's going to feel amazing. And then the nice thing about that too is if you don't have a ton of time, you don't need to do that 30-minute warm up before you squat. I could literally at 49, my warm up is so much shorter than it was at 29 or even 39
yeah,
because I sequence things like that. My execution of exercises is really good. So I rarely, knock on wood, feel anything is off or I'm getting hurt or anything. I could train hard as fuck. I weigh 40 pounds less than I used to, but I'm stronger on a lot of stuff. Not on like a back squat or deadlift or bench, but there's a lot of exercises that I'm stronger on than I was 10, 20 years ago.
yeah,
So the sequencing, the exercise selection, the choices, I don't use as much variety as I used to, just because I think it's important to know, okay, these exercises fit well with your structure. They align well. Joint stacking is good. You recover well from them. All right, great. Maybe I only have 3 exercises for this body part. I'll just rotate through them throughout the year instead of be like, oh, I need more variety. Let's do this weird shit. Then I'm like, I wish I didn't do that. My shoulder's fucked up for a week. So those are kind of the general rules that keep me feeling better and keep me feeling
yeah.
good most of the time.
Is your plan like rigid, or do you have a more instinctive approach at times?
Mine never is, right? I'm always programming for people, but like just because I'm gonna train, like anyone I work with, if they're in the vicinity, they want me to train with them. And then also just from a social perspective, I mean, I, I'm sure you probably know this about me. Like I know everybody, right? So there's always someone around somewhere that knows me, or I know them, and we want to train together. So I'll tweak it based on whatever. Like, and sometimes it's not ideal, right? If you said, "Hey, I'm in town today. Do you want to do a pull day?" And I'm like, fuck, I just did full body with this person yesterday. I'm like, yeah, let's just do a pull day, whatever. So it's
Yeah,
not ideal at all. Like I make the sacrifices for my own training more so just to have fun and to coach people and to build relationships a lot of times. The
yeah,
coaching
yeah,
thing is just like I could be there with someone and coach them through, but they actually get more if I coach every millimeter of their set. Then I go, okay, now watch what I was just talking about. Watch my elbow position here. They're like, oh, I got it. Yeah, now I see what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah.
So
That was quite interesting when you spoke about when someone asks you to do a pull day and you're thinking, shit, I did full body. Because that to me says that we always have that residue of becoming too, like, we focus on our own routine. And if anything comes in and breaches that, we get stressed.
yeah,
How did you, like, I think it might be safe to assume, because I think all lifters suffer from that
yeah,
at some point, because
yeah,
we think, oh shit, this muscle's not going to grow if I work it again. We
yeah,
know now that it's a load of bollocks,
yeah.
but it's hard to shake that mindset. It's hard to
Mhm.
shake that mentality. How did you shake it off eventually?
I think honestly, it's an interesting question. There's a lot of things I'm talking about here that I've never spoken about before. So thank you. I think what it honestly was me going through the journey of becoming a different person mentally and emotionally and becoming way more confident and way more secure in my own skin. So
Yeah,
that years ago it would have been like, oh, I'm gonna lose size, I'm gonna be this. Like the 40-pound lighter version of me has 1,000 times more confidence than when I weighed 227.
yeah,
And now I
yeah,
walk around like 185 or something. So I think it was really that because my identity isn't tied to weighing 220 anymore. I mean, sure, I'd like to, but like it just doesn't. work with my life. So I don't know, like at my age and my genetics, I mean, I'd have to be doing like Anadrol or something to be 220, I think. So like, it's more like, hey, Lee's here. Let's have fun. Let's build a relationship. I don't care. Like maybe my back's not going to grow this week or something. But like, who gives a shit, right? Like I know how to get back on track. I know how to eat and recover and all those things. And
Yeah.
so back then, I think it was just my entire identity and my confidence was built on, no, it's going to fuck up my workout and I'm going to be smaller.
I'm starting to like get under the idea as I age and as life becomes more stressful that I don't think a program is the way forward for a lot of older guys. I think we need to operate within a framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we have to get rid of the demons that can hold us back, because if we align ourselves to a program, we are just creating stress eventually, because it will be impossible to follow. And I think that's something that people don't speak about in training, because it's just like programs, workouts, you need to do this to get this outcome.
Mm-hmm.
When I think like when you get to a certain age, it's just about stimulus. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Right. Yep.
The important thing is that it's created in some shape or form.
Yes.
And that's something that we need to embrace. And that is how we can move forward as older gentlemen in that respect.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's how you get injured, right? That's how so many times little tweaks throughout the years came from, okay, I did let's say 100 pounds on week 1, 105 on week 2, 110 on week 3. Okay, now I have to do or 110. I mean, now I have to do 115 on week 4, and you're warming up. You're like, oh, this feels awful, and you just do it anyway, right? So now I go into the gym. To your point, I have the structure. I know it's a push day, but let's say I get on, like, nope, this exercise doesn't feel good. I'm going to go do this one. They're like, okay, that feels good, and I have no preconceived notion of what I have to do. So it's not like, okay, I tried this machine press, it doesn't feel good, I'm going to go do this dumbbell press. But it's not like, what did I do last time I did dumbbell press? It's like, no, whatever I can do this day and get the stimulus, like you said, meaning I'm going to train with really good form, close to failure. I don't care if it's 10 pounds lighter, if it's 10 pounds heavier, if it's 5 reps less. It's like, that's what I'm capable of doing on that day based on my recoverability, my sleep, my nutrition, where I'm at in life that day. And that's what you have to do. There's no living organism that's just like predictable, right? It's always up and down, up and down. So why would we think that you could have these planned out training cycles like this? It just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you also have to take yourself away from the bodybuilding lens.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, oh shit, I did an incline yesterday. That means this section of muscle has been neglected. Oh shit, that's my whole workout ruined. And it's all a head game. It's all a head game. The physical part is easy. It's tangible. Whereas what's going on in your head is you can't really quantify it. It's just an attack from all angles.
Yeah.
I want to also move on to another couple of subjects, because there's a few things I wanted to speak to you about, namely 2 other areas of expertise. I know you're a massive wrestling fan, as am I. However, my kind of knowledge of wrestling kind of goes back to the 80s and 90s. I still watch the product, but it doesn't hit me the same way as it did.
Right.
But I know you've got some experience training wrestlers.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any wrestlers that you would like to name that you've trained?
I mean, I don't really like to name drop stuff. If they post it, it's fine, right? Like the other day, Chad Gable, his real name is Chaz Betts, posted a thing, and he said, I never felt better with my training. So, which is cool, because he's an Olympic athlete and he's a professional wrestler, and he's been doing this forever. And as you know about Olympic wrestlers, nobody trains harder or longer than they do. So it's cool for him to say like, fuck, I never felt this good in my entire life. But I've worked out with a lot of the guys, trained with a lot of the guys, a lot of the active guys. I think you probably know some of them. But yeah, and it's funny because high level athletes are making the same mistakes that average people are making. So sometimes you'll get in there like, you don't know this, it's crazy.
Yeah. So how do you program the training for a wrestler as opposed to like a guy in his 40s that's just looking to build muscle?
Well, the main thing is you have to look at their schedule, right? So you have to look at, okay, let's say Monday's Raw. So they're going to be flying to Raw. They have to be there early. So it's probably an off day. And then Tuesday, or it might be just a cardio day. Tuesday, they're usually flying home. So that's an off day or a cardio day. So you have those 2 days. And then they're going hard on Wednesday and Thursday. They may be traveling to a house show on the weekend. So Friday's maybe a cardio day. And then Saturday, Sunday. So most of the guys, or you move it back a few days if they're on SmackDown, right? So it's just based on the travel schedule, which is really hard on the body. I mean, if you're taking 2 flights a week or more, 52 weeks a year, just that in itself is a lot to recover from. You're taking bumps all the time, picking up 250-pound guys, flipping them over, you're landing. So they're already doing a lot. So you got to kind of manage that, right? Then it's really important to manage fatigue and recovery and maybe check in on their HRV and how things are going. And also that becomes important to listen to their body too. Because if you're flying off the top rope, hitting someone with an elbow going through the table, maybe what we had planned is going to feel like shit when you do it. You're like, oh, my elbow's fucked up. My ribs are fucked up from landing on the table. All right, we got to scrap the plan. You got to do something else. So you got to be very flexible with that. And then that would probably be like the main differences. It's just adhering to those things. I mean, but the average guy who's in his 40s, I'll probably still program pretty similarly. I'm not going to treat you like you should be in a retirement home, right? Like you're still going to train pretty hard and do the things. Maybe I won't have you. So, some of those guys at that level still may want to do maybe a variation of an Olympic lift that I wouldn't have you do, but just because they've been doing it well for years and they feel explosive doing it. But then maybe me and you are just doing box jumps, or we're doing cleans with a sandbag, or medicine ball throws. So for the older guys, generally, those would be I think one of the things that you lose the fastest, or the thing that you do lose the fastest is fast twitch fibers, explosive, the ability to express power and speed. So I want you to do that as you get older. It's like the fountain of youth. You don't want to lose that and become old and slow.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say, hey man, do a barbell clean. Like, let's just throw, jump. You could sprint with a sled, do hill sprints, do short sprints, maybe like 10 to 20 yard sprints, because you're not gonna build up enough speed and your stride length and the things about your posture in those first 10 to 20 yards. Generally, you're not going to pop a hamstring. If you start running 40s or 100 and you're 42 and you haven't done it since high school, you're probably going to pop something, So just being smart about it, doing stuff like that.
Yeah. One thing I've always thought about, like a wrestler training, is how do they factor in recovery? Because they're on the road for the majority of the year, stressful lifestyle, different bed every night, and also actually taking part in the product itself, which requires a high degree of athleticism and a degree of physical trauma. It always makes me laugh when guys talk about, I need to get my recovery in, and then you've got these jacked fucking wrestlers who are non-stop and they're throwing themselves off turnbuckles.
Yeah. So, you got to have great genetics. I mean, most of those guys that look the part at that level have great genetics. And then what's cool to see is, back in the 80s, guys were, smoking cigarettes in the back and drinking till 3 a.m. Well, nowadays, most of the guys take really good care of take care of themselves, right? Like they're taking meals in a cooler on the flight. So their nutrition is really on point, eating anti-inflammatory foods. They're trying to optimize their sleep as much as you can, which you have to. Like you said, you're sleeping in a different hotel every night. You got to be taking magnesium and whatever else works for you, CBD, whatever you can to get that sleep. And then I think, like, I always say I suck at traveling and I suck at flights and stuff like that. But I guess you get good at it, right? When you do it 52 or 104 times a year, whatever. So they have their whole routine down. They make sure they got the eye mask on the plane or whatever it is. Like, you just got to be prioritizing all that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to training, really doing the minimum required, the minimum effective dose, because to what you just said there, all those things are stressors. So we got to really keep the volume of the training down.
Yeah. I would love to see the training regime of a 1980s wrestler, because there seems to have been a lot more hedonism attached to that era. I mean, that's what I like to listen to, shoot interviews and listen to, like the Honky Tonk Man and Ric Flair.
Like Dynamite Kid's backstage drinking, smoking. He's on 3 grams of test a week. He goes smacks the shit out of what was it, the Rougeau brothers or something?
I actually watched the Dark Side of the Ring with the Dynamite Kid recently.
Okay, I got to see that one.
Oh, it is dark. It's horrific. But when you watch the metamorphosis of
he was on
the
so much
Dynamite
juice.
Kid,
Yeah.
like when he was in Britain, for example, and it was like the world of sport wrestling. It's where you had old women with handbags trying to hit you at the side of the ring, and he's like a skinny 17-year-old kid.
I was gonna say he's like 120 pounds, and then he was like 240 a couple of years later, just jacked out of his mind.
Then he goes to Canada and starts wrestling with like Bret Hart, Stampede Wrestling, and he is a fucking British bulldog. He's like got muscles everywhere, and but he's still keeping that high flying style going.
Yeah, the snap suplex.
I want to fire a couple of questions. Who are your 3 favorite wrestlers?
It's always tough. I would say Stone Cold, HBK, and maybe Bret.
Yeah, that's a good choice, actually. I've been watching a lot of Bret Hart recently, particularly shoot interviews. Okay, so who are the 3 best talkers on the mic?
Well, definitely not HBK or Bret. I would say Stone Cold, Rock, and Flair, maybe.
I was hoping you would say Flair. I like to send myself to sleep at night just watching Ric Flair. Like, it's not that he's putting me to sleep, but he actually keeps me awake. But I live vicariously through Ric Flair because, like, I'm a family man. I don't do much. All I do is exercise and fucking work. So I get to like relive my youth through Ric Flair promos.
Yeah.
Right. So now the one subject that I've really wanted to touch upon with you, and one thing I noticed that you always play on your Instagram reels is 1990s hip hop. I know you're a massive 1990s hip hop fan, as am I. Now I don't know how long this could go because it could possibly be a deep dive. So I'll try and keep it as compact as possible. What was the first hip hop album you bought?
See, now I've drawn a blank. God, what was it? Oh, it was Run DMC. Tougher Than Leather.
Tougher Than Leather. Okay, so what was the standout tracks on that album which made you then think, right, I'm going down this hip hop rabbit hole?
God, you build me up as a guy who's into hip hop and drawing a complete blank. I can't think of anything. I mean that whole
Don't
album.
let me down, mate. Don't let me down.
I know. I don't know that whole like I remember listening to Run DMC and LL very, very vividly around that time. And again, like I was a really quiet, shy, insecure kid. So to hear LL say like the braggadocio of hip hop, right? To hear Run and DMC say I'm the king of rock, there is none higher, and like all this braggadocio stuff, I'd never heard that before. And LL say I'm bad, I'll take a muscle bound man, put his face in the sand. I was like, oh shit, like it made me feel like, okay, maybe I could reprogram my brain and be more confident, and have that. It took years, but still, yeah.
The thing about hip hop is that back then you never heard it anywhere. Like you had to hunt it down, and you would buy it, and you would see that parental advisory sign, and you would feel empowered because you knew you shouldn't have been listening to it, but you would take it home, and the swear words and the other profanity would send a chill up your spine because it was just weird to hear.
Yeah, those were all the things that I loved about it. Just that it was so counterculture and so rebellious and all that.
Yeah, so who, like, when you've moved on from, like, because Run DMC and LL, as good as they are, they're kind of entry level to some degree. Because then you start to dig deeper, then you start to, like, you start to side with a coast, so to speak. I started off West Coast, but then I made the transition to East Coast around about 1992, because the first album that I actually went out and bought was Ice-T, Rhyme Pays. No. The Iceberg.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I took it home, and you were just engrossed because Ice-T was an amazing storyteller. I don't think he gets enough credit.
You're right. Yeah.
Like his ability to tell a story was quite deep.
You're very right, because most people just mention Nas or Slick Rick or somebody or even Cube.
Yeah. But Ice-T, he wasn't as, like, his wordplay wasn't as complex as Slick Rick and Nas. It was basic to a certain degree, but sometimes the basic stuff works.
Yeah.
Because you're listening to music at the end of the day. Sometimes you don't want to be like cerebrally challenged.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, because I was more East Coast at first, you know. Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, Public Enemy, EPMD, Naughty by Nature, Mobb Deep a little bit later. You know, that was what I came up on. Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul. So that was like my, I'm sure there's people I'm forgetting, Redman. That was my shit early on, and then Wu-Tang, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I love West Coast too. Eventually, I got into the West Coast too.
Yeah, what era would you say is the real golden era? Some people would argue 1986 to 1988, 89, Big Daddy Kane, Just Crew. Then you've got 1990 to 1994, Souls of Mischief, A Tribe Called Quest. Then you've got, say, about 94, when it, I think it's probably one of my least favourite eras, but I still love it. What era would you say is the one that you gravitate towards nowadays?
Like 80, you kind of nailed it with the first example. I think like 85 to 93. Yeah. And if you had to make it even smaller, I would say probably 88 to 93, like that 5 year there.
Yeah. So who do you who are the top 3 MCs from the East Coast in general?
Are we talking lyrically or just overall?
Overall.
See, then it's a different conversation, because if it's lyrically, I would go.
Yeah, I'll get to that, Jay. I'll get to that.
All right. Lyrically, you got to go Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, and Black Thought's number 1.
Who was the last one?
Black Thought.
Black Thought? I don't think I've heard of Black Thought. You threw me a little bit there.
You haven't heard of Black Thought? He's the greatest lyricist of all time.
Black Thought?
Lead singer for The Roots.
I know The Roots, but I don't know them individually. I just know the band.
Oh, see, now you're going to regret that, because I'm going to send you every one of his songs.
You've thrown me. You've completely thrown me. Right, okay. So let's move on to lyrics.
No, I'm sorry. That was lyricist. Oh, so you want overall.
Okay. Overall.
We're going East Coast?
Yeah.
Then I would probably go LL, Nas, and Jay-Z.
Jay-Z. I don't know. That's quite a controversial choice, actually.
I'll tell you why. Because overall, I think about lyricism. Jay-Z's pretty fucking good lyrically. Contribution to the culture, contribution to the game, longevity, their body of work. I mean, you know, it's hard to argue with Jay what he's done above and beyond hip hop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Okay, right. So, who has the best the voice? Who has the voice that grabs you? I mean, not lyrically or like over, but just that voice where you hear them and you go,
Chuck D.
Chuck D.
Yeah.
Because Chuck D, it didn't have the best flow, but he had authority.
So intense. Yeah. You hear Chuck, it's like, what the fuck? Yeah.
So what is your favorite Public Enemy song?
Rebel Without a Pause.
Rebel Without a Pause. All right, give me another one.
Number 2 would be so hard. I mean, I love Lost at Birth, which is kind of a weird, rare track.
Yeah. Is that from Apocalypse 91?
Yeah. I love Welcome to the Terror Dome. I'd say Bring the Noise is number 2, though. I think Bring the Noise is number 2. I mean, you could always throw Fight the Power in there.
Yeah.
I mean, Black Steel and the Hour of Chaos is an amazing song.
Yeah. What's your favorite, more obscure Public Enemy song? The one that no one ever seems to mention.
I feel like Black Steel and the Hour of Chaos would probably fit the bill there.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of. I like the B-side Wins Again. I think B-side Wins Again is the best.
Oh, okay.
Public Enemy song.
All right.
The way that Chuck D's voice is put through that effect, and the way that Flavor Flav complements the song, because Flavor Flav, because you do know that when Rick Rubin took Public Enemy on, he told Public Enemy that they had to get rid of Flavor Flav.
Yeah, remember that.
Of which they obviously refused.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last one I'm going to ask you is 3 underrated rappers for the East Coast.
Tretch from Naughty by Nature. People just think of OPP and God, what the hell's the other mainstream song?
Uptown Anthem.
Oh yeah, no. OPP and Hip Hop Hooray. They think of like he's like a party, but Tretch lyrically is nasty. If you listen to their first album in 1991, knowing Tretch was 19 years old, you can listen to every track on that. Tretch is such an underrated MC. Big L's probably underrated. Lyrically, Big L's nasty. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking Big Pun. I mean, Big Pun, you could make an argument it's top 10 lyrically.
Yeah. Do you know that? I was expecting you to say Cool G Rap at some point. I'm a wee bit disappointed, Jay.
Well, I love Cool G Rap, but I think if we're talking to real hip hop heads, they're always going to say lyrically he was one of the greatest. So it depends who you're asking. Like for me, I think he's appropriately rated, right? Like he's mentioned in that top 10 conversation all the time, and I can totally see that.
I read a story or heard a story recently when Big Pun was introduced to Cool G Rap. He went down on one knee and kissed his ring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was also hoping you would say Cool Keith. No one ever says Cool Keith.
I know. Yeah. I don't know why. Like for some reason, growing up around New York, we didn't really get into the Philly scene as much.
Yeah.
I don't know why, which is weird. Because now, I mean, Black Thought's Philly, and he's my favorite of all time. But there's something about it. Maybe because like New York and Philly always have this weird thing, especially with sports, and you kind of New Yorkers hate Philly and Philly hates New York, so maybe it had something to do with that.
Yeah. Okay, so you get buried with one album. What is the album?
Let's see. It's either Takes a Nation of Millions or The Low End Theory.
Okay.
It's like a coin toss. Today I'll go with The Low End Theory.
Yeah, one thing they never say about A Tribe Called Quest is it's very rare a band releases 3 albums in a row, which are all classics.
I know.
I mean, the only other band I can think that have did it is Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, true. Yeah, because you can get in heated arguments with people. Is Marauders better or is Low End better? And I could hear both sides of the argument.
Even the first album.
First album's great.
First album's amazing.
First album's underrated, but every song on those 3 albums is great. Every single one.
Yeah, I think it's just the bass in the second album. I think the bass, when you hear that first song with that double bass, to have heard that in a Jeep.
I just got goosebumps just thinking about it. Yeah. And you know what's cool about the second album was that was like Fife's real breakout party, right? Like he was more of a key player on the first one, and then it's like, yo, microphone check 1 2. What is this? When Fife came out, it's like, yo, Fife's here.
And
Fife ain't playing.
You hear it's when the hi-hats kick in, when Q-Tip comes in, it's
amazing.
Anyway, Jay, listen. I could be here all day, and I've got a wife to run a bath for. You believe that? Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure. You made me laugh a lot there. You made me laugh, especially with the guy blowing his knee under the 20 reps. But that was the fabulous Jay Ferruggia. Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.